Peace and blessing, family. It's your man Maarifa, and welcome to another Maarifa moment where knowledge is reborn. Are you ready? Let's go. All right, and we black. Yeah, it's your man Maarifa, black yet again with another great video, a great topic for today. We're going to be discussing Sumeria and who the people of Sumeria really were. Dig, but before we get all into that, you know how we need to do this. We need to get the admin notes out the way. So check me out. You see this banner right here. We need you to like, subscribe, follow, and share all of our social media platforms at Maarifa Sar LLC. Also, second thing we need you to do, check these fly melanated beings out who rocking the gear right now. We need you to rush over as soon as the video's over. Go to marifasar.com and make a purchase today. You dig? I'm rocking the Maarifa gear. You should check me out. You should rock that Maarifa gear too. The #1 casual clothing brand online in America today. You need to be rocking that Maarifa and representing the knowledge movement. Yo, all right, bet. So now that that's out the way, let's go ahead and get into our topic. Are you ready? Let's go. All right. What we're looking at here is Sumeria. All right. So we're going to be discussing Sumeria and who the Sumerian people really were. All right. And some of the falsehoods that come out of the Sumerian, mythology and culture. Okay. So there's a lot to be concerned with when you discussing Sumeria because it has such a biblical significance. All right, so people like to tie the Sumerian people to the ancient Hebrews, and we're going to kind of dispel that myth, and then we're going to show you exactly who these Sumerian people really were. All right, so if you look here on the screen, you see, they have carvings, wall carvings and stuff, in ancient Egypt as well as ancient Sumeria. All right. So Sumerian had their own culture and, they had their things that they carved, in the stones and stuff like that. But what we're going to discuss and take a look at is give you a little bit of knowledge about it, just enough to pique your interest and then have you go out and do your own research and dig even deeper and get to know exactly what's going on. So I'm going to introduce it to you so you can go further and do your own research and give you some more in-depth knowledge about Sumeria and who the people really were. All right. So you notice that they are, similar in that image you have here with Sumer having that scroll carvings and ancient carvings on the wall, just like you see in Egypt, right? So that's a similarity. So you have here on the map, if you notice on the map, we're going to discuss where Sumeria is located. And it's located right there near the Persian Gulf, off to the right side of Saudi Arabia, in the middle of Iran and Saudi Arabia, right there in Iraq. It's modern day Iraq, the southern tip, right there where the Euphrates and Tigris River, meets and comes into the Persian Gulf. That's where Sumeria was, and that's the area that we're discussing. You notice right on the western part of it, Egypt is not that far away, probably about 100 miles, west of Egypt. All right, so we got the landmark, you know what I'm saying, identified there, and it'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, ancient Africans were all the first Navy seamen. You know what I'm saying? Sea meaning that they navigated the oceans. Okay. So they had navigated the oceans with ships, large ships that they built. And they were able to travel to different parts of the land, of the earth, and stuff like that on the ocean waters, into the seas, and things of that nature. They were the very first, we, African people, the very first to do so. All right. Don't let people trick you into believing that Europeans were the first ones to sail with Christopher Columbus and this, that, and the third. That's an absolute lie. Okay. Africans been sailing the oceans and the seas thousands and thousands and thousands of years before Christopher Columbus ever even got in or into a boat or on a ship in the ocean anywhere. Okay. You can see on the carvings and the walls of Kemet in Egypt, you'll see them depicting the Africans riding along in the boats. You see the boat right there. You know what I'm saying? You see the oars and things of that nature that they had. They were using the pedal. So all of that stuff would depict, you know, Africans actually were Navy types, who were always navigating the oceans and stuff to be able to travel across different lands. All right. That's the way they got there. They didn't always walk to everywhere they went. They took, boats and things that they built, and they went by the ocean and went by the sea in order to get to the location that they needed to be or wanted to be. You know what I'm saying? So here I am in Egypt, in Cairo, over at Khufu's, pyramid right there in Cairo. And Khufu's boat, was preserved. Right there, you'll see, the display that they have of Khufu's boat. I'm right there in not the Cairo Museum, but in Giza. You can go and see it for yourself today in 2021. Go over there and take a look at Khufu's boat, and it'll show you. You know what I'm saying? The Africans were, the first ever to navigate waters. You know what I'm saying? So we had boats already. We built big ships and stuff in order to go, from one part of the sea to the next. All right. And how we did that, we used the monsoon. You know what I'm saying? The monsoon winds was able to, travel along the monsoon winds, which will push you through the oceans, through the seas at certain times of the year, where the winds were, just right. And it blew you right into, certain parts of the lands and countries and different parts of the, land on Earth on the planet where you want it to be. You know what I'm saying? So you can see some of the routes that the Africans took with the monsoon from Africa into India, into Saudi Arabia, even all the way down south to Australia and even into Asia. You know what I'm saying? The Philippines, Vietnam area, all of that area right up in there. So you could tell where the Africans had navigated towards, and then that's why that their presence, how they were able to establish themselves in those areas, and they settled in those regions, colonies and colonized those areas. You get the Naga Cushites and stuff like that that went out, and we're going to discuss the land of Cush in a minute. All right. But this is how we got there. The Africans left, Africa off the coastal seas on boats, on ships, and went across and went to, different parts of lands, settled in those regions looking for resources and things of that nature, settled in those lands, had babies, had families, grew, and then multiplied and started developing those lands and things of that nature. And then they would go back and forth, back home, and then they would go back, to the area, just like today, where you got people living in the north, when you got people living down south, you know what I'm saying? And people travel back and forth. So that's how, the same situation occurred in Africa. All right. So we had those trade monsoon winds that went in, and we were able to maneuver and navigate the seas and go to different parts of the world. All right. So Egyptians and, they say Mesopotamia, but I'm going to say Sumerian. Sumerian religions has similarities. They were polytheistic in nature. They worshiped multiple gods, or they venerated rather multiple gods. And, one had venerated the sun, the other venerated the moon. Where Sumeria had venerated the moon, and, Egyptians had venerated the sun. So those gods had, were around those particular, items and stuff like that. So you had other similarities that they have in between each other. The ziggurats and the pyramids. The ziggurats don't compare whatsoever to the pyramids at all, because they ain't nothing but mud mounds, pretty much, and they don't hold they weight or nothing like that. But the master builders, the Ethiopians, Cushites from the Nile Valley had been up, what I'm saying, in that area, and they had to use the resources that was in that area in order to build. So which ain't too much, resources, as far as stone or brick in Sumeria, so they had to use mud in order for them to build. You know what I'm saying? That's why they got the clay tablets with the cuneiform and writings and stuff like that on the clay tablets and mud, because that's the only resource that they had in that area. They didn't have the limestone, you know what I'm saying? They ain't had the brick, like down in Ethiopia. They ain't had limestone, like from Sudan, in order for them to build structures and stuff. So they used the resources that was in that area in order to build, and they used the ziggurats and nothing but the mud mounds that they used to build from the clay houses. Okay, so if you look in here, you seeing that this description right here, and people will say, "Oh, these are the Persians," and the Persians and the ones who had Mesopotamia on lock, and then they had their own religious system and this, that, and the third. So it's a lot of deep information about that. You can go and do some research and homework on your own about Mesopotamia, and people want to give credit to Mesopotamia and try to say that they were the first civilization to start out, but in fact that was a complete lie. The ancient Africans are the first civilization to ever start out. So it wasn't Persia or nothing like that, it was Africa. So those Africans, and you can see right there at the top where these men, with the beard, hanging up, they have the winged sun disk. It's easy to identify the winged sun disk, and they get that from ancient Kemet, which is Egypt. So that winged sun disk is synonymous with, the worship of the sun. You know what I'm saying? And Ra, and Horus. You know what I'm saying? So Horus the protector, Ra the sun god. So you have the combination of the two, so you can see that clearly. And here is another depiction of it carved in stone. So you can see right there in Sumer at the bottom where they had the winged sun disk, and then up at the top, you see the Uraeus winged sun disk, you know what I'm saying, in Egypt, Kemet. So you had to get this knowledge from somewhere. There had to be something that had some similarities and some understanding of what that meant. You know what I'm saying? So they got that information from somewhere. So they couldn't just come up with it out of the blue and be like, yo, this is what we're going to do and this, that, and the third. But they knew and understood what that meant. You know what I'm saying? That winged sun disk. So those ideas came up out of the Nile Valley. You know what I'm saying? So when they took and traveled into, Sumeria, which is modern day Iraq today, they took with them the knowledge from the Nile Valley culture, and then they expanded and expounded on it from there. You know what I'm saying? You can even see in the writings and the way that they're structured. You see that everything is in the column. You got the columns and things of that nature from the Cushite Ethiopian writings on to the Egyptian writings and even into the Sumerian writings. You see that there are columns and rows. All right. So the columns and the rows and stuff like that, it's a similarity that you can see within those particular cultures. All right. So you have these ideas that they and concepts that they took with them when they traveled. You know what I'm saying? And they developed, those lands. So they still had those traditions that they took with them, and you can see that they carved in stone, the language in which they spoke. You know what I'm saying? The Ethiopian writings, the Egyptian Medu Neter, and then you had the Sumerian cuneiform. You know what I'm saying? So that in itself should let you know that they had some type of understanding the concepts. These people had to been affiliated somehow, some way. You dig? So when we looking at the ancient Sumerians who carved themselves in stones and their identities, look at the hair, you know what I'm saying, that they have on there. And look at the beard. It's the woolly hair and the curly hair, curly woolly hair. And see, the African Ethiopian has the same, hairstyle, the curliness of the hair, which is in the spiral, you know what I'm saying? And the brother right down there in the middle right there has the same hairstyle. These are African melanated Ethiopians. You know what I'm saying? So this is how we started out, as Ethiopian beings. So those Cushite Sumerians came from the land of Cush, which is modern day Ethiopia today in Africa. Okay, they traveled the seas and they crossed the seas with the boats, and then they traveled into those regions up the Persian Gulf, and then settled into that region right off the Tigris and Euphrates River, right there in the middle. So all of that area was populated by Ethiopian Africans. Okay, so that was a colony of Ethiopia. So Ethiopia colony had, went all the way up to Greek, Greece and stuff like that. It rose up through Egypt, because all of that came from down in the mountain of the moon in Uganda. And it went up north, through, the Nile Valley and up the Nile River. The Nile River flows north. Okay. So from the south up to the north, into Lower Kemet, into the Mediterranean Sea. So you see the influence in the hairstyle that you see right there of the Sumerian and the Ethiopian. There's no, coincidence there. That's the same hairstyle. Okay. So you're talking about the people who are the same people. These are melanated African beings from Ethiopia, Kush, who went into those regions in Sumer and developed those lands, and they settled in those lands. All right. You can even see it here with the Nubians. The Nubians here from Central Africa, near Kush, Ethiopia, were the children of the Ethiopians. Okay, so you talking about the Nubians? Look at the hairstyle, look at the dress. You know what I'm saying? You can go back here to the thing. You see right there. You see how he got the dress on, and look at the hairstyle with the Nubians. Same, hairstyle, pretty much. You know what I'm saying? So this is depicted on the walls, the artwork that's on the walls in ancient Egypt, and they'll show you, who the people truly are. Okay, so Ethiopians, were a very great, uh, empire, and they had ruled for several years, and they had ruled on the throne in Kemet for multiple, dynasties. You know what I'm saying? Throughout, the dynastic periods. So you have that heritage that had been passed down from tradition, with the Ethiopian, Nubian, Cushite, okay, that ruled in that region, and they had all of their, similarities and things that came from them. Now we have the biblical myth, the biblical lie that has been, perpetuated throughout the centuries. Okay, so this biblical narrative, false biblical narrative that's been pushed, what I'm saying, can be easily, dissected when you break down the scriptures. Okay, when you read in Genesis chapter 10 about the lineage, how they say Noah had three sons, Japhet, Shem, and Ham. They say that these particular sons had fathered many nations, right? So these nations are attributed to the sons of Noah according to the biblical story. And that's all it is a story, is not a fact. Okay, so I'm gonna break this down. I'm gonna prove it to you right here. So you see, Ham is allegedly a part of Africa, right? So Ham, if you trace the lineage all the way through, Ham had a son named Cush, and Cush had, his children and things of that nature. But one in particular was Nimrod. Nimrod became a mighty warrior, and he had, settled in the land that we call Sumeria. Okay, and he developed that land, and he became great and mighty according to the Bible. Now, if Nimrod was mighty and great, and he had built the Tower of Babel in Babylon and things of that nature, how then can you get Abraham to be able to come up out of that particular area, which is the land of Ur, and not be, a Sumerian African? You know what I'm saying? His lineage, Abraham's lineage, had to come through Nimrod, which is of Ham. You see what I'm saying? So Ham, if Ham is African, then that means that Abraham had to be African as well. He couldn't have been no Hebrew. You know what I'm saying? He couldn't have been anything different. So they saying that the Hebrews, according to the Bible, come through the line of Shem. And Shem, if you see right there, is in the Saudi Arabia area. So they said the descendants of Shem, Jacob and all this stuff like that, they had settled in that region and developed those lands, and they became a mighty nation in Saudi Arabia, which is modern day Saudi Arabia. This is according to the Bible in Genesis chapter 10. Okay. Now, but you notice here that Ham has a lineage, and then Cush was his son, and it went all the way through Cush, which is Ethiopia. Nimrod, which is the Ethiopian, he also had a son named Sheba. So if you look there, you see Sheba, and Sheba has settled in the land, the southern tip of Saudi Arabia, right around Yemen, okay, which is modern day Yemen. So in that area, in that region, Ethiopia is right across the Red Sea. It's not that far of a distance. They can easily take a boat and go and cross into Saudi Arabia, into Yemen. Very easily, the Ethiopians could do that. And that's exactly what they did. But what they try to say here in this Bible is that Shem was the one, and they were a different breed. But tell me this, if Noah had three sons, how can he have three different races of sons? Okay? How can he have, a white European race of sons? How can he have an Arab race of sons and an African race of sons? All right, now I know that mitochondria Eve and the black woman is God, and she's able to create all phenotypes. I know this, all right? That's where we going to, okay? So when you saying that Noah was able to, have three different sons by the same woman, she had to been a black woman in order for her to create those three different types of phenotypes. You dig what I'm saying? So the black woman had to been, with Noah in order for her to create an albino white European, and then have, Dravidian, Ethiopian, and also an African. Okay. So you got to have an understanding of what this all means and then break it down. So then you're looking at the area in which they said that Abraham, who was the first Hebrew they called in the book, of Genesis, coming from the land of Ur. And if you read the book of Genesis, it'll tell you that Abraham was a Chaldean. Chaldean is in the land of Ur, which you see right there at the southern tip of the Persian Gulf, okay? Right before the Persian Gulf, starts. So that's Sumeria. That's ancient Sumeria, where Nimrod had began a mighty nation and built the Tower of Babel, according to the book of Genesis. All right. So if Abraham came through that lineage and he was a Chaldean, which is of Hamitic, African descent, how then can he be of Shem? How can Abraham be of the line of Shem and become a Hebrew? It's impossible. Okay, so there's the disconnect with the Bible. You know what I'm saying? So there's the confusion that they try to play the trick on. So they need to try to take away the African, power structure from the lineage of Africa and diminish the African as much as they can and try to build up this false, character that they call the Hebrews in order for them to validate, their religion and validate them, going out and destroying and utterly destroying and wiping out African tribes and territories and taking and raping and pillaging their women and then killing off their babies and things of that nature. They had to validate this religion somehow, some way, and this was how they did it. You know what I'm saying? With these three lineages, Japhet, Shem, and Ham. That's how they separated everything. And then they put it into the Old Testament, into the Bible, and then gave it to you and indoctrinated a young generation. And it was called generational indoctrination. And they indoctrinated the youth. The youth took it and accepted it because they knew no better. And then they taught their babies, and then their babies taught their babies, and it just spread and continued over the centuries. And that's how we get to religion that we have today with Christianity and Islam, both which, talk about the same, structure, the lineage structure of Abraham, which came through Samaria, okay? And Samaria came through Cush and Nimrod, okay? So that is where you get the disconnect right there. So when you trace the bloodline and go all the way back, you'll go to the very beginning and find out that that lineage, that bloodline is from Nimrod, which is of Cush, which is Ethiopian, okay? African Ethiopian in real life, African Ethiopian, not the false biblical narrative, mythological, stuff like that. Nimrod and all this stuff never existed. Ham and all this stuff never existed. We talking about the Ethiopians who are real people, real Africans. They migrated to that area, sailed in the ships on the seas, and went into that region, settled into those lands, and built up that nation and that colony, and then built that structure up until they were conquered eventually, by the Persians several centuries later. All right, so now you're looking at, the biblical encyclopedia. So if you look at the biblical encyclopedia and the dictionary to tell you the definition of Ethiopia, and it says blackness, heat, burnt face. Okay, so that's a clear distinction of who we are. The Ethiopians were clearly black Africans. All right, so you saying the country in which the Greeks and the Romans described as Ethiopia and the Hebrews as Cush lay to the south of Egypt and embraced in its most extended sense the modern Nubia. Okay, so if you look at the highlighted portion, it says the Hebrew do not appear to have had more or much practical acquaintance with Ethiopia itself, though the Ethiopians, you know what I'm saying, were well known to them through their intercourse with Egypt. So they're trying to tell you right then and there, they're trying to say that the Hebrews were connected and associated with Egypt, and they knew about Ethiopia because they were talking to the Egyptians, and the Egyptians are closely related with the Ethiopians. Well, how is that even possible? You're not having no interaction whatsoever with an Ethiopian, but you having all this interaction with the Egyptians who had no separation from the Ethiopians. Pretty much they were intermingling and having babies and everything like that with the Egyptians, and the Ethiopians were always intermingling and having babies with each other. Okay, so how is that even possible? So it says right here, the inhabitants of Ethiopia were a Hamitic race, according to Genesis chapter 10 and 6. They were divided into the various tribes, of which the Sabaeans were the most powerful. Now, the Sabaeans were of Sheba. Okay, so when you look at Sheba, and that was Nimrod's son, and according to the Bible story. So this here is the Biblical Encyclopedia Dictionary. So they're going to have their own, theological slant on this particular story and how Ethiopia is. You see how they try to tie themselves into history, real history. They try to tie the biblical story into real history with people who actually really existed in real life, the Ethiopians, and they try to make, these Hebrews associated with them when they tell you clearly they said the Hebrews did not appear to have had much practical acquaintance with the Ethiopia. How is that even possible if you in the region and you have Ethiopians who were ruling on the throne as Pharaoh? You understand what I'm saying? How then is it not possible for these alleged Hebrews for not even have any, interaction or acquaintance with any Ethiopians when Ethiopia is the mother of Egypt? Okay? Ethiopia is the mother of Egypt. Cush is the mother of Egypt. All of its religion, all of its knowledge, all of its, ancient understanding, you know what I'm saying? Egypt owes all of that to Cush. Okay, so they came from Cush, Ethiopia, down in the mountains on the moons in Uganda. They went up, and you know what I'm saying, and they became a part of it. So the Nubians are, the Ethiopians. So you looking at the burnt face people, these are the Ethiopians, the Nubians. Okay, same people. Nubus had become a, slave term. So the Nubians didn't really like that, term because they felt it was derogatory. They called themselves the Barbara. All right. So if you looking back at the history, and you looking at the names in which they, depicted themselves, you can go back and see, you know what I'm saying, who these people really are. Ethiopia, Kush, the territory had stretched all the way, up north, even west going into Libya. It has stretched all the way to West Africa. You know what I'm saying? And even went further east into, India and, the isles of Asia. You know what I'm saying? So all of that region, the Naga Kush, the Naga Kushites and stuff like that. So you talking about the history of the Naga Kush, and you can look and see all the statues and all of the, the things that depict, and you can see the woolly hair, dark skin, African depicted on, the statues and monuments and stuff all throughout Asia and through India and all that stuff like that. All that stuff they say is Hindu and all that stuff, that's garbage. That's African. Okay? All that stuff is African. That's Ethiopian African. It stretched all the way down. They even went to Australia, the Aborigines down there. You know what I'm saying? The Andamans, all this stuff, man. You talking about African culture coming out of the Nile Valley. All of that was spread throughout. You know what I'm saying? So that was all melanated and African before, the albino European had come down and conquered. All right, they came down from the north, by the Caucasus Mountains in the middle of Central Asia. All right, so you got to know the history. You got to go all the way back. You got to trace it all the way back and understand it. So look right here, it says right there, Ethiopia, one of the great kingdoms in Africa, frequently mentioned in scripture under the name of Cush in the Bible, okay? Ethiopia proper lay south of Egypt on the Nile and was founded north by Egypt as the cataracts near Sin, east by the Red Sea, and perhaps a part of the Indian Ocean. Perhaps a part of the Indian Ocean, man. How you gonna put the people in the ocean? First of all, number two, how you gonna say perhaps? You don't even know that they were sailing the seas and going and navigating the different lands and stuff like that. There's no perhaps. We have facts. That means artifacts that were found, stone carvings that are found, bones that are found that people excavate. This is called evidence. Okay, so when you find stuff that are trace of people back, people who are living in a particular area, they leave trace evidence of their existence behind. So you can find like stone artifacts, you can find bones and bone fragments, you can find teeth and all that stuff you can run DNA samples on, and you can trace it back and get to know that these was African people. Okay. The name Seba was given to the northern part of Ethiopia, all right, which is Sheba. But then it says here, the history is much involved with that of Egypt, and the two countries are often mentioned together in the Bible. All right, so you're talking about Ethiopia and Egypt, but yet and still in the other paragraph, they saying that the Hebrews did not appear to have any much practical acquaintance with the Ethiopians. But even though they said down at the other paragraph that uh, the history is more involved with that Egypt and the two countries are often mentioned together in the Bible. So Ethiopia and Egypt pretty much are synonymous with one another because we know they both one and the same people, one and the same culture. Okay, so there's no difference right there, and they know it. The biblical theologians, they know it. They just be lying to you in them churches, trying to confuse you. So they know you're not going to go back and do the research and read. So that's why I'm trying to introduce it to you so you can go out and be interested enough to go and find out for yourself. Go research it for yourself. Don't believe every word that's coming out of my mouth. Go and do the homework and read for yourself like I did. Educate yourself and coming to the knowledge and get to know who you are as an individual and what your people accomplished. You know what I'm saying? We had some great accomplishments as African people. All right, so look right here. This is the ATS Bible Dictionary, and they're talking about the Sabaeans. The first denotes the inhabitants of the country called Seba. This appears to have been the great island, or rather peninsula of Meroe in northern Ethiopia, or Nubia, formed between the Nile. So Meroe is the capital, or it was Napata was the capital of Ethiopia during that time, which is in Central Africa, right over there by Ethiopia. And I'm going to show you the map in a minute. So go down to the next highlighted portion. It says in Genesis 10 and 7, their ancestors is said to be a son of Cush, okay, the progenitor of the Ethiopians. So Cush, the progenitor of the Ethiopians. So meaning they know who those people are. They know that Africans that came out of the what they're talking about, the Bible that went into, the land of Ur and Nimrod and things of that nature. They know they were Ethiopians. Okay, they telling you right then and there. They are of Cush, which is in that biblical bloodline of the Cushites. Okay, the Cushites is of Ethiopia. All right. So then Meroe was one of the most important commercial cities in interior Africa. Let's see, a branch of this family, it is thought, located themselves near the head of the Persian Gulf. And the Sabaeans mentioned in Job 1 and 15 were probably Cushites. Come on, man. This is in the biblical dictionary, Encyclopedia. You can Google this and research this yourself. This is what they put out. This is what white European theologians put out, and this is what they come to know. They already know that they were African. They let you know right then and there. These people have settled in the Persian Gulf region in the land of Ur are African Ethiopian. Okay, so that means if Abraham, okay, came from the land of Ur, he too was an Ethiopian African. Okay, wasn't no Shemitic Semite. He was no Semite, no Hebrew, none of that stuff. Abraham was an African. He had worshiped multiple gods, just like his father. His father had worshiped multiple gods, just like they worshiped multiple gods in Egypt, just like they worshiped multiple gods in Ethiopia. They got the knowledge from the Nile Valley. That culture came out the Nile Valley. Polytheism had been on the planet way before any monotheism. Okay, Akhenaten had changed the religious concept from the polytheism to the monotheism. Okay, Akhenaten did that in Egypt. You know what I'm saying? 2700 some BCE. No, 1500. I'm sorry, 1500 BCE. I can't remember which dynasty. It might have been the 18th dynasty, but I can't remember which dynasty Akhenaten came through. But Akhenaten was the one, and the people had rejected that. You know what I'm saying? But he had did it for, political reasons because the priesthood was getting too strong. All right. So in that essence, it was a rift between, the polytheistic and the monotheistic, understanding and faith. All right. So that has stretched all the way up to, modern day Iraq and Assyria, you know what I'm saying? Into the Levant, which is African territory. You know what I'm saying? All the way through up to Phoenicia. You know what I'm saying? The Phoenician Greece, which was African territory. Into Greece, which was African territory until, the albino European came down and conquered. Okay, after they grew in numbers. So let's look here and see here. This region called also Yemen was probably settled by Sheba, the son of Joktan. So what they trying to say, Joktan he had a son too, according to the biblical story. Okay, according to the biblical story, Joktan is the son of Shem. Okay, and Shem had a son named Sheba too, but Ham had a son named Cush, who also had Nimrod, and Nimrod had a son named Sheba. So how fortunate, how convenient it is for them to share the same name. You see what I'm saying? This is how they play, the tricks that they play in the Bible. They try to make it seem as if these Shebas are two different people. Okay? So they trying to disconnect yourself from the African, orientation of it, and then try to add some, Semitic type of connotation or peoples to the story in order to put them a higher bloodline ahead of the African. Okay, so that's what they doing. That's the games that they play. So then you see in the highlighted portions right there, the two others of the same name are mentioned in the Bible. Okay, it is possible may have had their residence in Africa, but the question of these two Shebans is obscure and difficult to determine. They tell you right then and there, they don't know. It's difficult to determine and it's too obscure. That means they have no clue. They lying. Okay? Anything that is, it has to be, figured out and stuff like that, and they don't really know, and it's obscure. That's a lie. You know what I'm saying? You can tell the truth is just like plain in front of your face. All right, you can't deny it. It's undeniable. So they talking right there. They telling you it's obscure. We don't really know. You know what I'm saying? It's difficult to determine who these two Shebas were and this, that, and the third in the Bible. But you wrote about it in your book. You put it in your Bible. You put it in your Old Testament. Why would you do that? Unless you were telling a lie. Why would you do that? Why would you put those, two people in there and try to claim a land and say that these were the Semites and these were the Africans? No, when you knew clearly that the Africans were the only ones controlling and ruling that land. Was no Semite. What was a Semite? There was no Semite. It was only African. Okay? Ethiopian Cushites. So they can miss me with that. Now look, let me tell you something. A great, great book that I recommend you go and check out. Purchase this book and go ahead and get it. It's The Wonderful Ethiopians of the Ancient Cushite Empire by Drusilla Dungy Houston. All right, this queen, this sister, she broke it all the way down. She will give you all of the answers that you're looking for to identify the Sumerians the correct way. You know what I'm saying? This book is a powerful book. I recommend it highly. You go and purchase it. You can get it on Amazon. And, read this book. It'll unlock all of the mysteries of Ethiopia and who these people were and where they traveled to and what lands they settled in. And so you can know who started those regions and how they began and how it can differentiate, the Bible, and it can debunk the Bible and pretty much tell you, hey, this stuff is really, in the Bible is not really real. You know what I'm saying? So the real true history and knowledge is in the research right here. And Drusilla Dungy Houston, she did the research. She got the sources and stuff together, and they all a part of that. You know what I'm saying? So go and check that out. That's what I recommend. You know what I'm saying? All right. So that's it. It's all the knowledge, the time we have today. We got the knowledge out to you. You know what I'm saying? We gave you the knowledge and dropped it on you and gave you a little bit, just enough for you to get interested so you can go out and do your own homework and research your own for yourself. Like I said, go out and study it and research it for yourself so you'll get to know who the Sumerians were and what they meant to civilization and how they had an impact, major impact on the world that we have going on today. Okay, and the reason why we have these religions that we have, okay, is because of the ancient Cushites and the Sumerians, who were the Sumerians, which were the Ethiopian. Okay, so when they say Sumeria and all this, that, and the third, they're just trying to throw you off. And they're not going to give the credit to Ethiopia, who they truly were, the Cushites. Okay, that's all we have time for today. But dig, the video is almost over, so we need you to go over to maarifastar.com. Rush over to maarifastar.com, where they having the summer fashion bundle sale going on right now. If you purchase the MAI 17 shorts, you get any inventory t-shirt 50% off. That's right, half off right now if you go over to maarifastar.com and bundle and save on that summer fashion sale. So take advantage of that while the sales last. Dig. So that's it. You know what I'm saying? That's all we have for today. Hope you enjoyed the lesson and learned something new. Go out and do that research on Sumer and go and find out for yourself what it's all about. Remember, this has been another Maarifa moment where knowledge has been reborn. So the more you know, the more you'll grow, and the better off we all shall be. So until next time, I'll say love and light. Peace. Let's go. All right. We made it. We made it. Live at Seneferu's Pyramid. Okay. Seneferu built this